With the PSAT less than a week away, we're going to run through 10 tips which are going to help you succeed on test day. We're going to go over some basics with some of the most commonly asked questions that students have. We're going to talk about how to avoid some of the most common mistakes that students have on test day, and then we're going to dive into some deeper details talking about what the PSAT is looking for some of the most commonly missed question types, some of the rules that you have to know that are going to help you score as highly as possible, as well as some tips and tricks and approaches for some specific math question types that students often struggle with on test day. Now, the PSAT itself is really just a baby brother version of the SAT. It's a little bit shorter and it's a tiny bit easier. But this means all of the other SAT videos on this channel can also help you as you're preparing for the PSAT, especially this one about tips and tricks as you're heading into test day. Now, the other thing is, if you are watching this video, this means you are at the beginning of your test prep process. So go ahead and subscribe to our channel because we have lots more helpful content coming along, as well as complete online courses which can help you prepare for the SAT and ACT. Now, 3 things you should have with you on test day. Number 1, you want to have a watch. You don't know where the clock is going to be in the classroom. And when we talk about our pacing guidelines here shortly, this is going to really let you know if you're staying on pace as you work through the sections, so you're able to complete all of the questions. Now, you want to make sure you have at least 2 number 2 pencils with good erasers. And the last thing is make sure you bring a calculator that you're comfortable using. If you have a graphing calculator and you're comfortable using one of those, that is the ideal situation. But if not, a basic scientific calculator can still help you with all the questions on the test. The biggest challenge for many students the first time they take the SAT or PSAT is knowing, how am I supposed to pace myself? So here are some pretty simple pacing guidelines which are going to let you know if you are keeping up with pace on test day for the reading section and the writing and language section. Now, for the math section, the biggest mistake here for most students, and this really carries over to the other sections as well, is students will just sit on one question that they get stumped on for 5 or 6 or 7 minutes, and they won't give themselves the opportunity of seeing the other questions later on in the section. Now, both of your math sections for the no calculator and calculator are going to escalate in difficulty from easiest to hardest for your multiple choice questions. Then they're going to reset for your free response questions. So this is going to show you where you can expect the hardest questions on the no calculator section as well as the calculator section. But your goal on the PSAT is to make sure you see all the questions before you start going back to any of those questions that stumped you. Those free response questions at the start of the free response portion are going to be far easier than the most recent multiple choice questions you were just dealing with. We want to pick up as many points as possible, and every question is equally weighted on the PSAT, so we might as well pick up all of our easy and medium points before we deal with picking up the hardest ones. Now, for many of the hardest questions in the PSAT that look really overwhelming, the SAT often will give you points in some way, shape, or form. This is going to give you a really easy way of starting to solve these questions. Anytime you get any sort of X and Y values, you can often plug them into the question itself or the answer choices, and you're going to be able to find your answer really easily. So if we're dealing with a graphing question like this that most students immediately look at and get really overwhelmed by, and we're asking which of these functions correctly models this, all I want to do is pick a really easy point. And so I could say I could pick the point 10. And what I would now know is I plug 10 into all of these answer choices, I'm going to have to get an output in my P of n in this part of the output of the function that's going to be somewhere less than 20. And it's really going to have to be less than 10 as well. And the only one that's going to work for is D. This lets us find our answer pretty easily. We can actually apply the exact same thing here on 13. In 12 and 13, as we discussed earlier, these are supposed to be the hardest questions of the no calculator section. All I have to do here is I have to plug -1 in for X, and I have to plug 1 in for Y. And once I do that, I can pretty easily see that it's just going to simply be A minus B plus C equals 1. Anytime you see X and Y values on your PSAT, see if you can plug them in. It makes a lot of these difficult questions far, far easier. Now, one of the other concepts that both the PSAT and the SAT love are exponents. So this is kind of a little excerpt from our book here, but these are all the rules that you want to make sure you're refreshed on. But the really common ones that trip students up are your fractional power rule, your power rule, and that negative exponent rule. This almost always comes up for, once again, some of those most difficult questions, but if we know them, they're pretty easy. Now, what the fraction power rule tells us is that the root index becomes the denominator The power underneath the root becomes the numerator. So really simply though, if you ever saw something like the square root of x, this is just because there's an imaginary 2 here and 1 basically sitting here. All roots are a square root unless stated otherwise. This is just the same as x to the 1/2. So here all we're doing is the square root of 4 equals 2, and we already covered the x to the 1/2 part, and we're able to get our answer right. Make sure you've refreshed on your exponents because you're probably going to see some of these on your PSAT. All right, now one last quick tip for math, and definitely check out the video above because I run through a lot more math tips there, but is percent increases and decreases. Both the PSAT and SAT love this, and it's such a simple thing you can learn in 30 seconds here. Now, anytime you're expressing a percent increase or a decrease, you're always doing 1 plus or minus that percent expressed as a decimal. So if we were showing a 50% increase, I would simply be doing 1 plus 0.5. If I was doing a 50% decrease, I'd be simply doing 1 minus 0.5. So in this instance, because I see the 1.6, that's going to tell me it's a 60% increase. A lot of the rest of the SAT math you are going to see is covering a lot of the basics you've already seen in high school. So another great thing you can do is take one of the practice PSATs on the College Board website, and that's going to let you make sure if there's any other stuff you should brush up on. All right, now the first tip I can give you for the writing and language section is concise is nice. Your job on the SAT is generally speaking to pick shorter, more concise answer choices when possible. Now, what the SAT is really testing you on is wordiness and redundancy. The time you want to be looking out for this is when all 4 answer choices are expressing the same idea, but they're different lengths. You're being tested on wordiness and redundancy. Well, here we already said we were looking for a biography, so this is redundant. If we're at a bookstore that sells popular books, well, if we're at a bookstore, we know they're selling popular books, so that's redundant. When the impulse hit him at a bookstore, well, already in the sentence, we said on a whim, so that's showing an impulse. So here the shortest answer is right. Don't just blindly pick the shortest answer, but it is right if you can spot this question type correctly about 80% of the time. And this really goes for everything else on the PSAT as well as the SAT. Once you know the rules, once you know what you're looking for, it becomes way more obvious why one answer choice is very clearly correct and the other 3 are wrong, even though a lot of students initially struggle because they're just trying to pick what looks right or sounds right, but what sounds right to one person doesn't necessarily sound right to another, and the SAT and PSAT have to be objectively right versus wrong tests. Now, the most commonly tested of those objective grammar rules that most students are just going to be totally stuck on the PSAT are your sentence structure rules, which are your periods, your semicolons, your commas, and your fanboys, as well as all of your comma rules. It's not about whether you should pause or not pause or a hard pause. There's really objective black and white rules, and I'm not going to run through all of those in this video because they're laid out in detailed lectures and practice questions with in-depth explanations in the free trial of my Ultimate SAT course. So go ahead and check that out. It's not only going to help you with your PSAT, but the stuff covered in the free trial is going to help you with your SAT as well. Now, for the reading part of the test, one of the biggest struggles for students on the PSAT as well as the SAT is they feel like multiple answer choices could possibly work. But as I said, the SAT and PSAT have to be objective tests where only one answer is right and the other 3 are wrong. So there's 2 really simple things you can think about which are going to help you identify right versus wrong answer choices on the PSAT. The first thing here is for an answer choice to be correct on the PSAT or SAT, you need to be able to put your finger on evidence that justifies that answer choice. It's not about your personal life experience or what you logically think would be right. Right versus wrong has to be supported by the evidence in the passage. Now, the second thing is for any answer choice to be correct on the PSAT or SAT has to be 100% correct. This also means one word is enough to make the entire answer choice wrong. So it's going to give you 2 simple things which can help you pick between right versus wrong. Now, there's a bunch of different ways that you can approach the SAT and PSAT passages, and there's no one best way for students. For strong readers, there's some ways that work well, and for students who struggle to stay focused and often get overwhelmed or zone out, there's other ways that work better. I'm not going to run through all 5 of the ways that are the most common ways that are effective for students. Once again, that's in the free trial, so please check that out. Just getting familiar with these different ways and then going through and practicing them is really going to help you out on your PSA test day. Now, if you're going to try any of those reading methods, make sure you grab one of the practice PSATs or work through a practice SAT passage and make sure you feel comfortable applying that. And the best way you can do it is you can just follow those timing guidelines we talked through and just do 1 or 2 passages. If you do that, you're going to already start to notice that you're going to feel a lot more comfortable and confident on test day, and you're going to get to see if that method really works well for you. Now, I hope this video has helped you out and made you feel a little more confident heading into test day. If you've gotten anything from this video or you want to follow along for more test prep advice as you jump into your SAT or ACT journey, then go ahead and subscribe. Now, if there's any questions you guys have heading into PSAT test day, comment those below, as well as any other test prep related questions you may have.